Welcome, everybody. We call this joint Minnehaha County City of Sioux Falls City Council meeting to order. It is Tuesday, August 22nd, and roll call. Do you want to call on the county side first?
We have a quorum present, so I don't think we need to call roll.
Okay, roll call on the city side.
Council members Erickson. Here. Erpenbach.
Here.
Kylie.
Here.
Neitzert.
Here.
Rolfing.
Here.
Selberg.
Present.
Starr.
Here.
Staley.
Here.
Okay, if we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now we need to do approval of the regular agenda. Could I have a motion on the city side?
So moved, Erickson. Second, Erpenbach.
Okay, Erickson made the motion and Erpenbach seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Council members Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
A motion for the county.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion unanimously passes.
Okay, very good. We do have a second reading, and I'll turn it over to Assistant City Clerk Tamara to read that.
Item 1, second reading. An ordinance amending the 2002 revised joint zoning ordinance for Minnehaha County and the City of Sioux Falls by rezoning certain property.
Okay. Welcome.
Good evening, Scott Anderson, County Planning Director, and I'll go over the rezoning request with you at this time, and I'll be available for questions if you should have them. This is a rezoning request. It was heard before the Joint Planning Commissions at the July 24th meeting. It's to rezone the property from A1 agriculture to a C commercial. It's about 7 acres, and it is located about 1/2 mile south of Renner on South Dakota Highway 115 or Cliff Avenue, the extension of Cliff Avenue. So this is a general location. There is an existing church on the property. They have a paved parking lot and direct access off of Highway 115. This is the church looking to the east. This is looking south back towards Sioux Falls. This is looking across the road to the west. And this is looking north, and off in the distance you can see the Renner Corner. The Planning Commission has had a hearing on this, and they have recommended approval. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. It meets our comprehensive plan, and I'm standing here ready for questions.
Okay, since this is a second reading, we would go to the public first. Anybody have anything to address from the public side? Okay, seeing none, open it up to the commissions and the council for discussion. Councilor Rolfing.
Yes. Would you go back to your first slide? I want to make sure that what I'm understanding here is correct.
This one?
Nope, the very first one right there. Okay, this can be taken two ways. The petitioner is L. Mark Renner, is deacon of Baptist Church, of Grace Baptist Church, and the property owner is the same. So does that mean that L. Mark Renner owns this, or that Grace Baptist Church owns this?
Grace Baptist Church owns it. Mark Renner is a deacon of the church.
But you can see where you could, I wanted to make sure that the church owned the property, not
own it.
Mr. Renner. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Okay. Could we have a second?
Second, Selberg.
Okay. Motion was made by Councilor Erickson, seconded by Councilor Selberg. Roll call vote, please.
Council members Erickson.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Staley.
Yes.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion unanimously passes.
Okay, very good. That moves us now to new business. And the first item under new business is the joint budget hearing for the Siouxland libraries.
He gets paid more.
Seems like a lot of work for that.
Good afternoon. My name is Jody Fick, Director of Siouxland Libraries, and I'm pleased today to be making our budget presentation for the 2018 budget year. And with this budget request, you will be investing $8.2 million in your library system. Our goals for this next year are to maintain a circulation per capita of 11 items per person. What does that number mean? Well, in comparison, in the state of South Dakota, the per capita circulation runs at 7.6 items per person, and nationally at 7.5. So here in Siouxland, in Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County, our people are using our libraries and they're checking out our materials. The budget will also allow us to spend $3.90 per person on new materials. And how this compares with the nation and South Dakota. In the nation, they're spending $4.16, and in South Dakota, $4.26. So some of that has to do with our size, and because we're a bigger community, we're able to spread our materials out a little bit more. And a lot of that also has to do with the shared system that we have set up here between Sioux Falls and the county, where we have a lot of locations, and we share our collections, and we float them to where they're needed. The rest of the budget, a lot of the budget is going to go to continuing our quality programming to encourage and promote reading. We're going to maintain the same levels of programs as we're currently doing this year. Our budget is a very flat budget, but we are pretty confident that we're going to be able to continue doing exactly what we're doing. So here's more details of our operating budget by program. Our collections area, that is the portion of the budget that is dedicated to purchasing magazines, databases, and to paying for the stuff that gets put onto the shelves. The actual books come out of capital, but in our operating, this is what we use to get the books shelf ready. In operations, this is where our personnel is all paid out of, and it also takes care of the training of the people, any supplies, and furnishings for all of our libraries. Technology is our computers and our software that we use to make sure that everything is running. If you've been at any of our larger libraries, you see the self-checkouts and the automated materials handling. That's all a part of our technology. The library has done some significant investment in technology, which has actually allowed us to stretch our staffing a little bit further. Each one of those machines we equate to 1 to 2 full-time equivalents. So it's definitely less expensive than putting people in, and it has allowed us to move people from being behind the scenes doing repetitive motion things which injured their bodies to actually interacting with people and doing more programming and delivering the services that we want them to be doing. Program support, this is where we pay for all of the supplies in our programs and all of the performers, we play honorariums. It's also where we pay for our tutors. This past summer, we had a big expansion of the Reading Bridge tutoring program, and that program is a partnership with a group called Reading Bridge. So they received grant money that then funnels through the library. They use our facilities and our collection, but then we pay tutors to actually go work one-on-one with children across the community in grades K through 5 so that they can get some extra one-on-one help before they go back to school. Most of the tutors are teachers in the local school districts, and this past year we expanded it to Garrettson and Hartford, which was quite successful. So Reading Bridge is going to be going around with me and exploring the rest of our branches to see if we can also do the program up in Colton, Crooks, Valley Springs, and Humboldt and Baltic so that we get it out to every one of our locations. In Sioux Falls, we are already running it at all of our branches here, and they are hoping to expand the number of sessions that they are currently doing so that we can reach more children. It's quite a successful program. And then facilities, that is our buildings. That's where we do all our repair and maintenance and utilities, and that, again, is a pretty flat budget. And part of that is due to our switch to evening out our repairs so that we're trying to, facilities has worked a lot with consultants to kind of even out things so that we get on a regular replacement so that you don't all of a sudden have a huge surge in needing to recarpet all of our buildings at once because they're all there. We're trying to make our repairs be as level as possible so that you don't have huge emergencies. So now for a little look at the operating budget by category. At the library, most of our budget goes for our people. And in this next year, it is a flat budget. It does include all of our benefit increases and our cost of living increases and those increases that people get because they're performing and they're at merit increases. We have done some reduction in our part-time hours. So in spots where we could squeeze a little bit, and instead of someone starting at 9 o'clock, starting at 9:30, we've done some of that to try to have as little impact on the person coming into the library. And then we are also having a reduction in retirement payouts because we don't have too many people who will be retiring in this next year. And then the rest of other than personnel, it's our other operating. We do have a couple of things that we're going to try doing that will help us in managing this next year. And one of them is a staff scheduling software. We have staff at 13 locations. We currently are doing most of our staffing on Excel spreadsheets, which works, but isn't the most efficient. When we have holes, you send out an email to everybody, or when you change a schedule, it's like, everybody look at the schedule because now you might not be working, at the desk at this time, it's at a different time. So right now we are evaluating different staff scheduling software that brings it up into the current age and allows staff to automatically do trades for open spots and to get notified of any changes in their schedule through text messages and emails versus what we're doing currently. And then we also want to take our patron incident tracking into a better software program. Patron incidents, anytime we have a negative, usually, issue with a patron, we do currently track all of that and log it so that if there's a bigger problem, that we have all the proper documentation when we're reporting it to the police and talking about things. And I want to get that into a program that makes the staff be more consistent with what information that they're remembering to share. So this next year's budget will bring both of those to the library. And then in our capital budget, for this next year, our capital budget is divided between three things: the print and AV materials. The budget has an increase of $20,000 for print and AV, which is keeping up with what we feel our population needs in terms of new materials. The next item is shelving. A number of years ago, after we built the downtown library, we went to, instead of buying unique shelving pieces for every location, we buy the same thing so that we're able to share between branches, just like we share our books. We will be updating all of the shelving at Ronning, and I didn't write down on my spreadsheet what the exact dollar is. It is on your detailed printout. But because we are now sharing as much as possible, we won't need to spend as much money because we're able to use other pieces from other libraries. At the Ronning branch, what we hope to accomplish is when you go into that library, it was built in 1995. And at that time, we made our shelving as tall as you could get it. So you're seeing 90-inch shelving, and people can't reach the top shelves. So we're going to make it be like our latest branch, Prairie West, and like the Cayley branch, where everything is at a height that people can actually use the collection. So that'll be a really nice upgrade for Ronnie. And then at the downtown library, we're going to put in a children's interactive play structure similar to what you see out at Prairie West, which is what is pictured in the presentation. That actual item is funded by grant money. We received a grant from the Sioux Falls Community Foundation last year, but because the dollar amount is above $7,500, we need to have it in the capital rather than operating. So that is something we certainly hope that you will approve, since we do already have the funds for it. So for 2018, our total budget request is $8,197,266. Of this, the Minnehaha County portion is $1,125,000. For the county, that actually comes from a specific mill levy on property tax that is dedicated to library. So the dollar amount that you're seeing was worked on between me and the auditor's office to make sure that we are within what the funding level will be. Our hope for this next year is that we're going to continue focusing on innovative hospitality, on making people go wow when they come in, that we have our libraries be basically exceptional. And so we've started changing some of our procedures around so that the staff are interacting with the building and with the collection and with the materials in a way that make you notice the library in a different way when you come in. The other thing that we're doing is purposeful programming. We right now are going through an evaluation of all of our programs to make sure that what we're doing fits our community, fits our schools, that we're not duplicating, but that we're working together and getting the biggest bang for what we're doing. And then well-trained staff. So this year's budget really concentrates on strengthening the areas where our staff isn't feeling as comfortable as they would like to. One of those being Reader's Advisory, which is such a core item to libraries that I want to make sure our staff have that confidence level when people come in and ask for recommendations. So that concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you very much, Jody. Questions? Councilor Neitzer.
Director, first I want to say that I said this to the previous library director, and I'll say it to you, that Prairie West, I live blocks from it. It's just a jewel of the community. I'm so proud every time I walk into there. And it's just beautiful outside with the landscaping right now. It's really wonderful. And Callie, you've done a great job with that too, the remodel. I recently went in there. It's very nice. RFID, is that at all the libraries now, or?
Yes, we have the radio frequency ID tag in all of the books. Not everyone has the self-checkout machine where someone comes up, because there is kind of a cost benefit as to what size you need to be, what your staff, what your circulation level is before it actually pays off to have that. But the places that don't have the self-checkout machine, they all have a pad reader, and so it has increased the speed at which they check out just dramatically. Because before with the barcode, you'd have to scan every one of those barcodes, and sometimes they wouldn't read. Now with the RFID pad, you can actually put a stack of 12 items on it, and it will go bing, 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 and they're all checked out.
My daughter does that with their stack of books every
Yeah.
few weeks. So, the new app is very good, by the way, too. I know you notice you upgraded your app. The after-school program at Prairie West, they do an after-school program. Who funds that? And because there's got to be some operations of paying somebody, and there might be snacks. So a lot of the school kids go over there, and I know there's some sort of structured after-school activity.
That is all us. That is all done by the library staff. The programming they do has been put together by the library staff. In the past 4 or 5 years, when we've been hiring new people, we've been deliberately looking for people who have skills in education and who are more focused on working, especially with children, but that have that understanding of what it takes to take that mind that next step. So we have a very strong staff in being able to put together good programs. So that is all done through our budget.
Okay, does the school district have any involvement besides just kind of, they communicate with us as parents, we get emails about it?
And we have regular visits from the kindergarten and first grade classes all come to the library on, I'm not sure if it's weekly or bi-weekly, but they walk over and use the library, and then we have special programs just designed based on the subjects that they're currently learning.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the director? Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. Question about the Bridge to Reading program.
Yeah, Reading Bridge.
Reading Bridge, sorry. I'm switching around. Do you have, I have really no doubt that it's successful, but do you have metrics that sort of support that statement? I mean, you say that it's really successful. We're doing it all over. How do we know? How do we measure what that means?
Yeah, the program has 2 directors that are from the education field, and it's been this program's been around since before we moved out of the old library downtown, so I'm not sure of its original start date, but it's been quite a few years. 5 years ago, they did a study with the Sioux Falls School District where they got permission to look at the reading scores of the students before summer, and then they were able to measure the ones that went through Reading Bridge and then compare them to a group of the children who hadn't to see, did they retain, did they improve, and they improved. As a group, they all improved. Now, were the parents working with them in other ways over the summer? I don't know, but I do know that reading, that summer slump that happens, did not happen for those kids who went through Reading Bridge tutoring.
That's really remarkable when you think about it, the kids that aren't involved. So how does a child become involved with that? How do you become a participant? Is it special, certain kids only, or how does that work?
They do the program also at some of the schools, and some of those will tie that to, like, it's a Title I school. Within the library, it's completely by parents signing them up. When they're setting this up, the directors of the program go and meet with all of the schools and talk about the program so that they can specifically market it to the children that they need, but it is open to everyone.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. So Reading Bridge, and anyone is able to participate in the summers. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilor Erickson.
Just a question, piggybacking off of the elementary school. Do you do any programming or anything for middle school as well? I know the library is really close to the middle school as well, so just curious if you do any programming for them or after-school programs or anything like that.
We do some. There is we started at some of the branches teen advisory groups.
Okay.
Some of them have been successful and some haven't so much. It's kind of, when you start getting into middle school and high school, you get some ebb and flow, and it kind of depends on who the kids are that are there at that time as to how the group evolves. So some of our branches have some very successful teen advisory groups, and each of them has a little bit of a different take at the Cayley branch, a lot of them like to help with planning programs for other children, that's a whole nother level. Right. You know, that when you are actually putting something together to help someone else, that's a whole nother level than when you are gathering to have fun or gathering to learn something as a group. So that's what our hope is that they'll get to that stage, but you have to take kids where they're at. You were talking about the Prairie West branch. We've just done some rearranging of that library to make the teen and middle school space a better space. So the spot had been a little too small, and so we actually moved the collection, shifted all of the collections down and moved it out so that we can make more space for the number of children. They are children even though they don't call themselves children, but that come after school. At Prairie West, we have two distinct groups because we have the Discovery Elementary and the middle school. We'll have the first wave of elementary kids, and then we get the wave of middle schoolers. And one of the things we've learned in being more effective in our staffing is that we used to run people the whole afternoon. We now make a staffing shift so that when the middle schoolers get there, they get fresh staff who are excited to see them, who haven't been worn out by the interactions that they're having. So,
right. Okay, that makes sense. And is that at all libraries then?
It depends, you know.
On the desire of the students?
Of the students. So we try it, and then if it's not going, we don't beat our heads, and then we retry again another year.
Well, and you're competing with, in middle school, they're in athletics and band and a lot of extracurricular activities that happen after school as well, so I can see that.
Our group at Ronning just did an activity where they made fleece hats for people who have cancer. So that was a fun activity where it got them together, interacting and doing for others. So,
one more quick question. The Reading Bridge, did I say it wrong? The program that Councilor Urbach was talking about?
The tutoring is just for a 4-week period in the summer with 2 sessions of tutoring a week. So they get 8 free sessions.
Do you bring teachers in for that, or is it all library?
It's the teachers are the tutors.
The teachers are the tutors.
So we provide.
District or you?
What's that?
Are they paid by the school district or by the library?
They're paid by the Reading Bridge grant.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
Thank you.
They receive grant funds, but we are the financial agent for the grant, so the funding does come through our budget. So it is a portion of our programming line, but it also is an income.
Okay, Councilor Staley.
I have 2 questions, Jody.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the shelving or the play structure, you're saying that you're asking for 900,000, but you said part of that wasn't going to come out of that. You getting
for the interactive play structure, it's actually $11,000. So, but we have received grant money that will fund that entire item.
Right. So is that it? But you said you still had to include it in the capital.
Right.
So that's really going to be less money at the end of the day. Is that going to show up as a?
The money has actually been deposited already in the city's accounts.
Oh, okay.
But because it's a capital item, it goes over into this other area that you have to approve. So
Okay.
even though we have the funding, I don't have the approval to spend the money until you give it to me.
And then just for my own refresher, I think you might have said this in the past, but for the public to know, when you're coming up with the share of the county versus what the city is doing, and of course, it looks like the city puts in a lot more money for the support of the library system. How do we determine the percentage of that?
Well, it was originally way back, because I was here at the beginning part. When Councilor Jameson and, now I'm going to blank on her name, but she was part of the commissioner at the time. But when they met and then they talked with our directors of the county and the city, and we did a comparison of our budgets and our circulation and our populations, it was very much a 15%, 85% split. Now, since then, in Sioux Falls, we have added 3 branches, and we have not added any branches out in the county. We've expanded the sizes of some of them, but so the split of the budget isn't quite that anymore, because the facilities in Sioux Falls are actually a lot larger than what we have for facilities in the county. And then in the county, we have another arrangement where, other than the building that's at Crooks, all of the buildings are provided by the communities that we're in. So when you're at Baltic, that library is paid for by the city of Baltic.
So they're handling like the operational cost of the buildings?
Right. They pay for the heating and the building and all of that part. We provide the staff and the materials.
So you're saying that that lessens up the...
A little bit.
Compared to Sioux Falls,
Right.
where it's totally...
Right.
So at some point, would there be like a powwow to say, let's reevaluate the percentages here? Is that been talked about?
There can be. I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of every one of our expenses. So if you want to see spreadsheets, and I'll go, okay, that one is completely a county expense, so 100% of that, and then I'll take out the things that are an overall, and I'll do a percentage. I'll charge the percentage based on the circulation percentage that the county versus city is doing. Mm-hmm. And when I apply that down, it's amazing how close we are. It's usually within $10,000 to $15,000, which in an over $8 million budget is quite remarkable. There are times that the county is putting in a little bit more money than their share, and there are times that the city is putting in a little bit more than what is their share. But this is a shared library system, and you can't, any citizen can use any of the facilities, and they do. We have people who drive from Sioux Falls out to Colton to hear that author. We have a middle school mom who talked about how this past year, she said to her daughter, you either need to go to camp or you need to go to a library program every week this summer. And so they drove to every time they could find a program. So they hit Brandon and Colton and Hartford, and they hit all the Sioux Falls locations. So it is one library system. The other part of it is, like when we buy books, we buy it for what our population needs, not for what Valley Springs needs versus what Brandon needs. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
but yes, we could certainly do a powwow.
Well, I just wondered if that got reevaluated periodically. And then give us a brief history. You said you were on board when this whole thing, I'm assuming you're not talking about Counselor Greg Jamison. You're talking about his dad.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Bob.
So before
And
that, what
Tweed.
year would that have been when they came together?
We merged June 1st of 1995.
And before that, then every community just handled their own libraries?
Sioux Falls had its own library. Del Rapids had its own library. In 1959, the citizens outside of Sioux Falls and Del Rapids who live in Minnehaha County voted to tax themselves and create the library district so that they could have a library. And that original library was headquartered in Hartford and had a bookmobile that went to each community. You're shaking your head. You probably remember that original bookmobile. That bookmobile was given to us by the state library, so it was like an old bomber of one. And they would put books in the city halls, each city clerk, they would just put it on the bookshelf, and it was kind of an honor system for people, and then once a month, the bookmobile would come back and change the books out. So we've come a long way, a really long way for what that original library service was.
And then did that get dissolved?
When we merged.
So now it's just a property tax?
A property tax, yeah, and that property tax still exists. That is what funds the county's portion.
Thank you.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Fick, for the presentation.
I'm really intrigued by that tutoring aspect. I think that's a wonderful program. One of my questions had to do with funding. I think you addressed that with Counselor Erickson, so I got that one answered. Another one, I'm just curious. I have a friend that works in the library system and has for over 20 years, and she just loves it. I was kind of made me think a little bit. How many full-time, I guess just roughly, is there an average tenure that you know of for full-time employees in the library system? I would imagine, do you have much turnover?
We have turnover when people retire, but we don't have a lot of turnover. There's a lot of job satisfaction when you're helping people. So we don't have a lot of turnover. On our full-time staff, we have a fair amount on our part-time staff. Most of them is because they do it as a filler in their lives, you know, because they're looking for something for a short time period. But yeah,
That's kind of what I assumed.
I don't know what the average tenure is.
10, 20 years, yeah. Anyway, not that important, just curious.
I would say that.
Yeah.
I would say more the 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Back to Councilor Erpenbach. I think you did. No? Any other questions? Okay, then may I have, on the city side, may I have a motion to approve this item as presented?
So moved, Rolfing.
Second, Erickson.
Okay, motion made by Rolfing, seconded by Erickson. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Erickson.
One moment.
Get a question.
Councilor Starr, did you have something?
Yes, yes. Just a quick question. No. This is the final time when we approve this budget, or is this the information that we're approving? So if we wanted to offer an amendment, this would be the time to do it, or would that come as our normal budget the night when we approve the final?
Regular time, I would think.
Councilor Erpenbach? I do believe that we're approving as presented at this point in time.
Yes, we are. That has been my understanding these many years.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right, proceed with the roll call vote then.
Councilmember Erickson?
Yes.
Erpenbach?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Rolfing? Selberg?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Staley?
Yes.
On the county side, is there a motion?
Motion. Second.
Didn't hear you. You're too close. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion unanimously passes. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is our joint budget hearing from Metro Communications. Welcome, Director.
Good afternoon. Paul Niederhaus, Director of Metro Communications. I'm going to give Anna a minute here to find her presentation. We'll get started. But I think I've had the opportunity to visit with, everybody at least once in the past year in my new position. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary here in September. So I've had a lot of first initial budget, a lot of first employee issues, hiring, some of those things. So this is my first joint body presentation. So it is a little overwhelming when you stand up here and look at both bodies up here. So hopefully it goes well. We're going to start off, as you know, Metro Communications has oversight from a Metro Management Council, with the chairman being Mayor Huther. And our original budget was adopted on June 29th of this year for the 2018 for our 2018 budget. So this is an overview of that budget presentation. So first off, we're going to talk about our staffing. And as you see in front of you, this is what Metro Communications is made up of. This is our staffing. But I think more importantly is who do we serve? 250 police officers, 220 firemen, 66 paramedics plus staff, 55 certified deputies from the sheriff's office, and all the rural fire members in rural Minnehaha County. And that accumulates to about 250,000 calls per service a year. So as you look at those numbers, as you look at a total number of 42 staff members that are working in our center, it's a very demanding job, and something that I've even recognized from my previous employment with the sheriff's office, how demanding it really is, and what a professional job they do, and how difficult that job really is. But I am proud of my first year to watch what they do. At Metro, we do work on the center floor. They work 3 8-hour shifts, so morning, afternoon, and nights. And next year, we are going to 2 power shifts to kind of focus on some of the peak times that we have at Metro. And that starts, kind of our peak time is late afternoon, that goes into the early evening hours, as you might assume. So it's something that we're going to focus on next year to see if we can kind of get more of our staff focused on some of those peak times for calls for service for those agencies that we do provide for. And the next item here is something I spent a considerable amount of time in my first year getting to know and learning more about and working on, and that is the 9/11 surcharge. And as you see, the surcharge totals about 63% of our total revenue at Metro Communications. We're very, very limited, obviously, on the revenue that we can generate. But one of the concerning factors is that the sunset clause is looking to go back in July of 2019 it will go back to $1. Currently, the surcharge is at $1.25. And that's something that's very concerning to us. As you can see by the chart, our surcharge rate has really been static. And obviously, I think we all know the landlines are going down. Wireless, we would think, would rise, but right now they're pretty static and they're not growing. We're not seeing the growth that we think that we should be seeing. And it's something that I've spent a considerable amount of time talking to the Department of Revenue with. I've had considerable meetings with senators from our state legislature about proposing for our next session. But it's something that we're focused on. Again, because we are so limited of our revenue sources, and when this revenue source is down, then obviously our other revenue source is the city and county. And that's concerning. And in the next slide, you'll see that. And this is where we get, the remainder of our revenue is from the city county. And historically, this has been a 75-25 split with the city and county. This past year, we did propose, and it was adopted, a 6% increase for 2018. As you can see, in 17, we had a 0% increase, and thus the main reason why we did go to a 6% increase here this last year for 2018. And a 6% increase comes to just over $56,000 for the city and just over $18,000 for the county with that 6% increase. Next slide is the additional revenue that we take in. $58,000 from the city of Brandon for the dispatch services that we provide for their police department. And the other item you see there is the Paramedics Plus. So this is transfer fees and link calls that come into Lincoln County that come into our center that we dispatch out. We keep track of those in a spreadsheet, and that total is from the contract. And this year we received $15, and that'll go up to $20 per call for 2018 and 2019, per that contract. And the last item you see there are audio fees. We do get a lot of people interested in requesting to get 911 calls. So we have a fee that we assess every time that we have to go back, copy that, and provide that. So that is the $14,000 there. Next chart puts together all our expenses. As you can see, obviously, our most expensive expense is going to be personnel. And that has increased, but we have added one full-time employee for our next year's budget. In addition, there's a 2% cost of living that was agreed upon with our union, and the additional steps that we have, and also our health insurance cost. And as you see there, our operating expenses in the orange, we have a 7.7 decrease. One of the biggest areas there for the decrease is the Zerker public safety software that we will be going to next year in 2018. Our first year, we have no maintenance fees, so you see a drop there. But in the future, we hope to keep those fees even lower than where we're at right now with the current software project that we have, or software that we do have. But it does maintain the programs and systems that we currently have. And then the last item is the capital outlay. And we've had 2 payments in 2016 and 2017 for the Zerker software project. And then in the future, we have some radio upgrades that we have to get caught up to for the P25 compliance that's coming in the future. But as you can see, I think we have pretty good control on our expenses. And I think we've done a good job in the past and currently on controlling those expenses. In summary, as you can see here, the revenue increase is 3.8%. Personnel expense or increase of 4.8%, and our operating decrease of 7.7%, for a total expense increase total of 2.9%. Part of the, again, the increase for the personnel is going to be the health care. We are projecting a 10% increase for next year. And just kind of a side note, this came into discussion last week at our Metro Management Council when we started talking about health insurance, but we do have our own health insurance. Our business manager, Anna Riker, works with the healthcare providers in working with and getting the contract for our healthcare for our employees. She does an outstanding job. And this last year, we were able to go to some HSAs, and it helped save quite a bit of money in our healthcare expenses last year. But that was something that came up that we're not a part of the city or the county. By statute, we cannot be, so we're independent that way. And again, the savings, the big savings in some of the operating expenses is due to the software project that we'll be going to with Zerker. And lastly, talking about the future. Again, I've spent a considerable amount of my time talking about the 9/11 surcharge. Again, I think we need to be an advocate and educate the public and senators in the state about the surcharge, how important that is for our revenue, that we cannot go back to that dollar. But also we need to look at other options. Possibly, can that increase? Because I'm afraid when, in 2012, when this was proposed and changed to $1.25, I think people thought, hey, this is going to fix it. But I think we all know with inflation, as expenses increase in inflation, that we're going to be here again in 5 years if we stay at $1.25, and it's something we're going to have to look at, possibly some inflationary additions to the surcharge. But also a concern that we have is getting the right to look at the telecom information, because currently right now the Department of Revenue has proprietary rights on that information. We see the total lines and the dollar amount, but before 2012 we could see that information and we could see any adjustments or fluctuations within our county. And I think that's something that we need to get back, maybe propose in legislation this next year, so PSAPs in the state have the ability to look at their numbers within their city and county to watch those fluctuations, to make sure that we are getting the money that we should be getting. And that has been a concern about the volatility of the surcharge, and again, working with the Department of Revenue to make sure that, again, that we're getting the money that we're supposed to be getting for the city and the county. In the future, too, as I touched on, one of the big moves that we'll have is the new CAD software. This is something that we've been working on for over a year, training staff currently to go live in February of 2018. So what this is a total public safety software upgrade for law enforcement, fire, Paramedics Plus, and Metro Communications. So this is a big change for us, and a lot of training and is going into this. But I have a lot of faith that we're in good hands with our training group, that they're going to put us in a good place when we do go live, and we start answering those phones on a different software system in February. Also, future consideration will be staffing. And it's something that we talked about at our Metro Council. As in my first year reviewing it and managing it, but I think it's something that we're going to have to continue to look at, is as the city and the county grow, as they grow with employees, our calls for service rise, obviously. And it's tough to do and maintain our professionalism and with the number of employees that we do have. Again, I think they do an outstanding job, but I think in the future it's going to be looking at additional staff. And the last thing that I think we're going to have to talk about, I think you hear more of, is the renovation of the public safety building. I know in the county there was a space studies needs completed by USD, And part of that was with us at Metro Communications. We're currently in the public safety building in the first floor, and I think there's been some discussion and proposal within that study to move us up to the second floor that is currently vacant. So I think as we move forward, as the jail moves forward with their new building, and there will be some tenants moving out of the first floor of the public safety building, I think it's a consideration for us. And I think it's a good option for us to stay in the public safety building for a couple different reasons. One, security. I think the security in that building is very good. I'd be concerned about going to a different off-site location. In addition, that building's a bunker. It can take about anything. And that's something we really have to consider with storms, tornadoes, that we can't lose service. And I think for us to stay there is probably the best option, and I think financially probably the best option for a renovation. But it's something that we're going to have to consider in our capital outlay in the future to start planning for some of those movements and costs in the future. But that concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to field any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director. Questions for Director Niedringhaus? Councilor Rolfing.
I have two questions. First of all, just going back on what we just talked about with the future and with renovations and backup and things like that, I'm going to, as you expected me to do, to ask you to include Lincoln County in any of those conversations we have, as they will continue to change and may be more interested in working with us as time goes on. I think every time there's something that is a possibility, even a slight possibility, working together with them, the arm ought to be out to shake the hand and welcome them in if we possibly can, because it just only makes sense in the long run. Second question I have is, I live in Lincoln County. I'm a resident of Sioux Falls. What happens when I dial 911? Do I go to Lincoln County? Do I go to Metro Communications, or vice versa? Or
well, you should come to Sioux Falls. If you're within the city limits of Sioux Falls, your call will come to Metro Communications. But that's not guaranteed every time. I mean, there's some times where, depending on your location, where that tower hits, it might send you to Lincoln County Dispatch. But the majority of the time, I don't have a percentage, it's going to come to us.
That's where some of these fees that you put out, the first one, where some of those fees are. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. Commissioner Bender.
Hi, thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. One, I don't see an actual number. What is the breakout between the city and the county?
For 2018, the cities will be $999,017, and the county's portion will be $333,005.
And so that's a 6% increase over what we each contributed in 2017?
That's correct.
So one more question. So your total expenses increased 2.9%, but you're asking for an increase of a 6% in funding. Is that because of the difference between the fees that you're getting off the phones?
But the biggest difference is because we did a zero last year, and our surcharge revenue is pretty static. We proposed for our 2018 budget, we took our actuals from our 2016 surcharge revenues because they're so flat. That is our personnel increase of 4.8% based on a new full-time employee and the cost associated with the 2% cost of living increase.
So, but net, your expenses are only going to be up 2.9% next year.
That's correct.
Okay. So this 6% in increase is the difference between the surcharge.
Yes.
Okay. So really, I mean, it's real money that the county and the city are asking to increase into your budget because of the surcharge.
Right.
Okay. That's all. That's the only point I was trying to make. Thanks.
Commissioner Barth.
Thank you, Council Chair. I just want to emphasize again the sunset provision on the surcharge. And I know as serving with you, sir, on the Metro Communications Board, we talked about sending a letter to our legislators on our behalf, and I think when the time comes, the county should send their letter as well, and the city may consider the same. It's hard to emphasize enough how important that is to our continued operations, and I certainly appreciate the equanimity which our director faces disaster, because clearly that would be horrible if we would lose that. And so we need to educate our elected officials outside of this group and our public in general. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Staley.
Oh, I've got a few surcharge questions as well. First of all, you were talking about you're not able to look at the telecom information. Right now, landlines are getting the 911 surcharge, but cell phones aren't?
No.
They're not? Okay.
Yeah, we get everything, yes. We get that. The wireless?
Yes.
Yeah. What I was saying is that number's been very static. It's not growing at the level that we think that it should be growing.
Oh, I see. So it's still big. What did you mean when you said you aren't getting the telecom information?
The proprietary information, what each provider, what they have for services from our county, that we don't see that information. Before, we used to see that before 2012, before the legislation took effect. Right now, Department of Revenue has access to all that information. And by statute, they can't share that with us. So we can't, all we see is the total numbers. And if we were able to see that, we can see the fluctuation. Say if a provider is 5,000 down from the previous month, we can see that, identify that, and question them, why is that down 5,000? So it kind of holds these telecoms accountable for each month for make sure that they are paying in that surcharge for each user.
So you think there's a chance they're not?
Correct.
Okay. And then I want to go back to the sunsetting issue. When that gets passed, why would the legislature even mention sunsetting, having a sunset clause?
Why they put it in there?
Yes. Is that to make it more palatable to the public to take
I think it's more palatable maybe for the lobbyists and the telecoms at the time, would be my guess.
So, I mean, that, and we hear that comes up occasionally, and, you know, it's kind of like a selling point for this is not going to last forever. So are you thinking that we should have another sunset, extend the data? You just want to totally
Or like
let the sunset? Okay.
Yeah, or even look at increasing that $1.25 surcharge.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
I might just dovetail on that, Councilor Staley. As a member of the Metro Management Council, we've seen the numbers without this, with the surcharge sunset going into effect. Essentially, we've seen what the numbers look like, what this budget would look like if that surcharge is not at least kept to the level it is, and preferably increased on more of an inflationary rate. The city and the county are going to be responsible for dramatic numbers. If the state doesn't figure out some way to be more sustainable about paying for our 911 services here across the state, not just in here in Sioux Falls. So the numbers were terrifying enough to me to make me think twice about how we do these things. And then my other thought was we don't, as Director Niederhouse is saying, we don't get to see those exact numbers anymore. But we keep talking about how Sioux Falls is growing at such a rapid rate. But as people come into the community, it almost feels like, and this is just kind of a theory we had, it almost feels like folks are bringing their cell phones with them. They come with that number from wherever they came from, and they don't get a new number here. And so they're not necessarily paying the surcharge in Sioux Falls because they still have their Illinois or New York or wherever number. And so there are some things happening there that we're going to have to figure out how this tax works in a little different way so that we are making it a sustainable process, because it isn't sustainable at this point. So.
Right. Councilor, go ahead. Neitzer.
That is a good question. Before I ask those questions, would you have any idea if I carried a Twin Cities phone number here, because I moved here from the Twin Cities, my phone number is still the 612 area code, but my billing address is here, where that surcharge would go?
It's your billing address, so where you are residing should go back then to, if it's in Sioux Falls, it should come to us then.
Assuming the providers.
But you see that a lot. You see a lot of these different area codes when you're talking to people on cell phones, and that's a question that we have too. And there's a lot of different questions, and I think the surcharge taxes are confusing at best to understand sometimes.
And without that visibility, you have really no idea.
Right.
Obviously. Your total budget is at about $4 million, is that?
That's correct.
in the ballpark?
Yeah.
So in today's dollars, if the surcharge sunsetted right now, you would be down $500,000? Is that about right?
Our total, yeah, it'd be $500,000 for a whole year. Yeah, $250,000, it'll sunset in July.
Yeah.
So that'd be $250,000 for that half year.
Okay. And then as far as the ratios of the city-county support, is that based on call volume?
Yes, calls for service.
And is that trued up every year?
I don't know what year that was implemented. I don't have that historical history, just because I have not been here that long, but I think it's pretty close to that 75-25, very similar to the conversation I think you had with the library previously, but it comes really close to the total calls for service between the city and the county.
Do you recalculate yearly and see if you're kind of in that range? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it, there's a little fluctuation once in a while, but for the most part, we're right in that 75-25 range.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Erickson?
Just if you could maybe touch on two other issues that we discussed when we met a few weeks ago. I certainly don't want to misspeak, but in relationship to how track phones are taxed, as well as there's a max limit on phones. So for example, if you have 150 phones, you're only taxed at the 50? 100.
For a business, right.
Per
so
business.
That's something that we're looking at possibly in our discussion with Senator Peters was increasing that, maybe that 100 maximum.
Right. And then talk to me about the track phones, how those are taxed, because it's my understanding that those are sales taxable, but don't pay the additional.
Yes, they're supposed to pay the surcharge, again, through that provider. And again, that's a question that we have for revenue too, is are we getting the money on these track phones that we should be getting? And that's kind of a hard one to follow. And they believe, based on our population and based on data from other states, that we are getting what we should be from the track phones. But I don't know from what kind of certainty they can say that.
Right. Thank you for the extra information. And I know, just to give you a compliment of, you've been reaching out, you've been trying to meet with the senators, you've been meeting with Secretary Jones, and so I'm appreciative for the extra above and beyond of what you're doing to try to make sure that your budget is made whole and that you're getting the funds that you need for your budget as well, because this is obviously a very, very important service in the city and the county as well as the whole state. And we rely on this for safety purposes and for health reasons, and so thank you for what you do. I know that you kind of hit the ground running right off the bat, and so thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the
Mr. Chair.
Director?
Thank you.
Councilor Starr.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just a little bit confused on how we pay your employees as part of Metro Communications. So they are county employees, but their benefits are?
Nope, we're a standalone agency. So we're not, they used to be with the county, and I believe it was in 2008, we became an independent agency, standalone agency. And again, the revenue was 75-25 split from the city and county.
Would that be beneficial to your group as a whole to be either a county or a city employee? Would that be something we should look at making a change in statute change?
I think there's been a lot of discussion, in my understanding, in the past, and I think the way that it's going now is going very well. I think the way that it's set up through the Metro Management Council that is provided, by the city and county on the council, I think it has been a very successful change since 2008, and I think the Metro Council members would probably say the same thing.
But would your employees say the same thing? I guess that's where my concern is more than anything. Would there be a better benefit package, obviously, compared
actually
to the
not.
city and the
I think actually we made some improvements when we did go standalone, and I think by going to standalone, I think the employees benefited salary-wise. I think Director Ketchum, the previous director, made considerable gains for staff and salary, recognizing that we do have to pay employees to retain employees. We have to take care of our employees. And again, I think we're in a very good place, and Director Ketchum was a big part of where he took Metro Communications when he came on to where I took over last year.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I do have a few comments myself since I've served on the Metro Council for 3+ years now, and I can't address Councilor Starr's last question in terms of the employees. It was just as recently as last year that the compensation package was actually greater than what was being presented on the county side, and Commissioner Kelly, at that time, Commissioner Kelly had concerns over that. However, he was overruled by the rest of the council, because we do see the value of investing in our employees and maintaining a good work environment, especially since many of our employees were being cherry-picked by another local agency here. And so we were very cognizant of that and tried to do what we could to improve not only their benefits package, but their salary as well. And I do remain very committed in facility improvements, because I think just about all of us have been to their facility, and you described it earlier as a bunker, but unfortunately it has a bunker type aesthetic to it as well too. So maybe if at least in the very near future, if your current budget would allow, we could at least get some new fresh paint on there and brighter colors, maybe even paint a picture of a window, since you don't actually have one. But I do remain committed in that regard, as well as for our backup facility too, because I have concerns that as we continue to grow in size in our service area, call volumes consider to grow. If we did have to move to the backup center, if something catastrophic event took out our primary center, I think we would really be pressing the limits of our current backup center. So we do need to take a look at that. And I would also state that with the sunset, it is very important that the sunset go away. And yes, sunsets do make it more palpable for different groups involved, but also sunsets are often initially established too to ensure that enough funding has been provided, or that the funding isn't excessive as well. So the sunset does give us that trial period to make that determination. But for this organization, for us to continue to provide the services that our citizens really, really count on, we need to do something, because the surcharge, despite the fact that our population is increasing by a fair percentage every year, our revenues are not. And as Councilor Erpenbach stated, if we don't get it through the surcharge, then the county and city are going to be ponying up those extra dollars. So, and lastly, I'd just like to compliment you on a job well done in your first year. As Councilor Erickson had stated, you've come a long way. You've had a lot of things to address, and you really did hit the road running. So great job, Director Niedringhaus.
Thank you.
Appreciate working with you.
It's certainly been a challenge, but it's been enjoyable too. It's I've had the opportunity again to work with, I think, most of you at some time, and the Metro Council has been very good to me. So thank you, and I look forward to hopefully another good year.
Okay, then, with no further discussion on the city side, may I have a motion to approve this item as presented?
Second, Rolfing.
Okay, motion was made by Councilor Erpenbach, seconded by Councilor Rolfing. Roll call vote, please.
Council members Erickson?
Yes.
Erpenbach?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzert?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Staley?
Yes.
Motion on behalf of the county.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion unanimously passes.
Very good. And I also, before we go on to the next item, I do want to also thank Commissioner Barth for bringing up the letter that was suggested at our last council meeting. I think it's important that we do that not only as a council, but as a county and as a city as well, too.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
We have a joint legislative platform, if you will, of certain things that we support that this board, I think both the commission and the council has voted on preliminarily to approve, and that the extension of the 911 surcharge is very high on that list.
It is.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, our final item this evening, or after it is evening now, joint budget hearing for Siouxland Heritage Museums. Welcome, Director.
Good evening, Bill Hoskins, Director of the Siouxland Heritage Museums. The Siouxland Heritage Museums is dedicated to the experience of learning for our community, its families and visitors through the collection, preservation, and interpretation of history. We operate the Old Courthouse Museum, the Pettigrew Homan Museum. Both are over 130 years old. Both are on the National Register of Historic Places. Both are really icons of history for our community. Our visitation last year was just over 81,000. We were open to the public daily in both buildings. The busiest days of the week were Friday, Saturday, and Thursday. The busiest months of the year, May, March, August, October. We had visitors from all 50 states, 29 foreign countries. The staff cares for over 108,000 cataloged artifacts. They range in size from the Faywick Flyer to things smaller than a dime. Actually, the buildings are probably our two largest artifacts that we care for. We have about 3,000 objects a year on exhibition. There are 10,000 in a searchable database through our website. Our staff presented over 700 programs on and off site to over 41,000 people last year. We also gave 1,500 guided tours through the historic house at the Pettigrew. We serve 47 K-12 schools in 24 school districts, including every school in Minnehaha County, and 59 other organizations and daycares. Most of our off-site programming happen in the city of Sioux Falls, but also Minnehaha County and Lincoln County are, we separate those out as well. We have 6 exhibition spaces at the Old Courthouse Museum, 2 changing spaces at the Pettigrew. Our goal is really to open a new exhibit every quarter, and we budget for exhibitions to last 18 to 24 months. It's really in a level of investment that we budget for. Next year, in 2018, we're doing 1 fewer exhibition planned than we do in a normal year. Rentals, the Old Courthouse Museum was rented 103 times last year. About 7,500 people came in for rentals specifically, and rentals netted about $44,000. That money was all went through the museum special enterprise fund. Weddings and wedding receptions are about 85% of our rentals. We couldn't do it. We have a full-time staff of 16 working in both buildings. We have 113 volunteers last year that really helped us function. They contributed over 4,800 hours. The number of volunteer hours in 2016 actually increased by about 10%, which is really outstanding. Our volunteers are recognized each year in an annual volunteer banquet that happens during Volunteer Week in April. The volunteer program is really managed on a part-time basis by one of our museum interpreters, Jesse Nessum, who does a great job. The Siouxland Heritage Museums were created in 1974 through a joint cooperative agreement between the city of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. It was the first joint cooperative agreement. It established an 11-member board. 5 are members of appointed by the city of Sioux Falls, 5 by Minnehaha County. The 11th member, in this case today, Diane Metley, is the president of the Siouxland Heritage Museums Alliance, a 501c3 private nonprofit friends group. Article 4 of the Joint Cooperative Agreement requires that the museum board shall prepare and recommend an annual budget to be presented to the city and county commission. That's what I'm doing tonight. Our budget is really 6 parts. and they're all labeled as budgets, and each one has a little bit different road rules as they've been set up. But the first one is the museum's operations budget. And we have a maintenance budget for the Pettigrew home, which is owned by the city of Sioux Falls, a maintenance budget for the old courthouse museum, which is owned by Minnehaha County, a new maintenance budget for the new collections storage building that's being set up. And then we have two revenue budgets, the Museum Special Enterprise Fund and the Museum Store budget. The operations budget would be 71% of the whole. The Enterprise Fund, about 21%. The other budgets making up the remainder. If you look at our 2017 budget, the numbers compared to our 2018 request, our operations budget is going up by about $17,000. Pettigrew maintenance is going down. Old courthouse maintenance is pretty much level. The new collection center, which is budgeted for 1/3 of a year, is at just under $11,000. It's an estimate. The Museum Enterprise Fund, we're looking at an increase of about $110,000 over the current year budget. That is a revenue budget. The museum store staying the same. So on a whole, we're our request is to increase from $1,004,000 to $1,542,000. Now looking at some of those as individuals, the museum operations budget is funded 50-50 by the city and county. That's how it was spelled out. It is adopted by you as a group. It's administered by Minnehaha County. We have no new requests for staff, no changes in our part-time labor. The increase is a total of $18,767. That's the increase in human resource costs for step increases. And if you look at it, 93% of the operations budget's human resources. We have the Pettigrew maintenance budget. The Pettigrew is owned by the city of Sioux Falls. The city funds that entire budget. It is adopted by the city council. And the county has been administering those funds for about the past 10 years. If you look at the maintenance budget, it really comes down to we have some minor building repairs, supplies for custodial things, paper towels and such, utilities, the security monitoring fees, and service contracts, particularly the elevator is probably the biggest one that we have there. Oh, and the city, just a clarification, I have decreased the amount we're asking for in 2018, largely because in 2017, the city actually through the hail damage repair from a number of years ago, and the capital fund is spending significant funds at the Pettigrew this fall, doing work on the roof and other things. And so that just caught us up on some of our other maintenance things, and so we were able to decrease that in 2018 based upon where our plans are. The old courthouse maintenance budget really is static. The only increase in there is in what we call contracts. It's really contractors. In this case, Kone, who does our elevator inspections, has increased their rate, and we're kind of over the barrel with that. But basically, the maintenance budget is for the same thing: utilities, cleaning supplies, basic repairs to the structure, the security monitoring for the fire and burglar. The Museum Special Enterprise Fund is a revenue fund, and we have revenue coming from a variety of sources into that. It was originally set up in 1996 as a fund to account for The revenues and expenses associated with the rental of space in the museums. It accounts for sponsorships and programs for which a fee is charged, donations, and so on. You get an annual report on that that happened earlier this year in April. So once it's all accounted for each year, you get a separate report. We're asking to increase that budget for 2018 to $331,732. Now, how are we using that money? It's funding all of our educational programming. It is funding about half of our exhibition expenses, most of the collections management costs for asset-free supplies and so on. We're moving marketing expenses into the enterprise fund, although the operations budget is still paying a large part of that. It's taking care of accounting for all the rentals. So all the expenses for the rentals are paid for in the enterprise fund, and it reimburses the operations budget for all the labor expenses associated with those rentals. Human resources, there are 2 full-time positions, the museum events coordinator and an exhibits assistant that the enterprise fund pays for 1/3 of their cost. So it shows up in the budget, in the operations budget, but the enterprise fund is reimbursing it. We have for 2018 increased budgeted the HR portion in this to provide for part-time labor to help us with the move into the new building in 2018, and also have provided resources for fixtures, furniture, and equipment for the new collections building. The collection storage building, this is a new budget. We have an estimated full-year expense for utilities and cleaning supplies and such of about $33,000. We're budgeting for 1/3 of a year for 2018. And again, just like the Pettigrew maintenance budget, the old courthouse maintenance budget, it's really those maintenance contracts for servicing the air handling units, natural gas, electricity, water, sewer, trash, as is pretty bare bones budget. Finally, we have our museum store budget. The museum store, this really accounts for revenues and expenses associated with operating the store. The store does generate revenue, and so in addition to the budget, just want to note that we have been asking for a balance transfer from essentially revenue in excess of expenses from the store fund to the enterprise fund. That's usually done as a balance transfer by the auditor's office under authorization of the commission early in each year, but we're looking at $10,000 next year from the store to the enterprise fund to help support educational programming. Significant changes from last year to this year. We have about $18,000 in additional HR, human resource costs in the operations budget. We're looking at $471 more in the old courthouse maintenance budget, and a $155,000 one-time expenditure from the enterprise fund to help pay for the collection storage buildings, fixtures, equipment, and startup costs. And then we have the new maintenance budget. That's a cost to each city, county of about $5,475. Just a final summary to summarize the budget that we're asking for, a total of $1,542,000. Those budgets, we really need a joint resolution adopting the museum operations budget, the collection storage maintenance budget, and the 2 revenue funds tonight. The city support, would amount to $583,815. The county support, $605,146. The principal difference in that being that the old courthouse is a bigger, more expensive building to keep up. And then the revenue, we're projecting supporting $353,300. That breaks down to about 38% of the cost for the city, 39% for the county, and revenue funds 23%. That's about as quick as I can get through all of this. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and I'd look for a resolution at the end.
Good job, Director Hoskins. Any questions for the director? Wow, you must have been very efficient and effective.
Can I move approval?
Yes, on the city side, motion to approve this item as presented.
Second, Salberg.
Okay, motion was made by Councilor Rolfing and Councilor Selberg, second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Erickson? Yes. Erpenbach?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
Staley?
Yes.
Is there a motion on the county side?
There is
Questions?
with a comment, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'd make a motion to approve this, but I just want to say it's interesting tonight that we had both the library and the museum, and somebody said, it takes a village to raise a child, and if we had everybody going to the library and going to the museum a little bit more often, I think, along with going to church, going to school, hanging out with mom and dad, I think we'd all be better off, and it's great, I think, to have these two things kind of quiet as they are, but I think they're really important to our community and our county.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second that motion.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion unanimously passes.
Well, that was our last item, and I'd like to say before we adjourn that it's nice to have a full council and a full commission here this evening, so thank you to everybody.
A little crowded.
Yeah, it is a little crowded, but it's a good crowded. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Nitzert.
Okay.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion unanimously passes. Thank you.
Yes, motion.
Have a good evening.